Hello, welcome to another community podcast here at the Collective School of Music in Lower Manhattan at 28 Broadway. My name's Josh Anders. I'm the Director of Curriculum and Instruction here at the school, and I'm super excited today to bring you a Collective alumni, Matt Butler. How are you doing, Matt?
I'm very well, thank you.
It's a great intro, right?
Indeed,
I try to get it
man.
really hyped up, you know what I mean?
The energy going.
You know? Matt is an established musician. He's also an alumni, as I said before. Continues to study here at the Collective with some of the Collective's faculty, including Bob Burke, which we'll touch on in a little bit. And is continually active in the nonprofit community, doing amazing nonprofit work, which I definitely want to get into, and some of the nonprofit organizations that you're starting, not only in the education sector, but also in the performance sector as well. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But more importantly, for those who are not familiar with you, why don't you give them a little introduction? Who's Matt Butler?
Who is Matt Butler? Matt Butler is a singer-songwriter from New York City originally. I'd say my music tends to fall into the category of Americana or folk. I grew up playing music. I've been a professional musician since I was about 15 years old. Started gigging in rock and roll bands and punk rock bands here, Lower Manhattan, Lower East Side. And I've been a solo performer for about the past 5 or 6 years, solo touring performer about 6 years, and I've been working in arts-based nonprofits for about the same amount of time.
That's awesome. Yeah. I know you've done a lot. You have a very storied career. You're very established. You do a lot in the nonprofit, like you discussed, and your experience in the band setting, as well as venturing out on your own into the solo performance, can be kind of scary at times. And I want to touch on that a little bit because gave me some insight off camera of some stories you have of how you became a solo act, and we'll touch on that. Sure. But firstly, what I want to talk about is your what's always really fascinating about you. And I've known Matt for about 2 years. I taught at the Collective, taught Ableton Live and Logic at the school for a little bit. And one thing I always liked about you is your hunger for more. I don't feel like you've ever really been complacent, as far as being a musician goes. You're always trying to learn more. You're always studying, and you continue to study here at the Collective and work with some of the faculty, specifically Bob Burke recently. And I know you're known for your guitar playing, but piano has kind of taken a lot on the recording side for the new projects you've been working on as well. Is that correct?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, and I know you're working with Bob. So let me ask you this: Why do you think it's important that musicians continue studying? Like, why are you still a student of the game?
Yeah, well, I think that's a good question. I would say probably most broadly, you have, as an artist, I think some sort of interior or internal experience that you want to externalize and share. And the craft that's how you paint the canvas. So, you have to figure out your technique in order to continue to better articulate what your vision is. How do I show them what it is that I'm hearing in my head? How do I make it clear what it is that I'm feeling in my heart? And as the music that you want to play changes, I think naturally as you grow up as a person and as you grow as an individual, you need to develop new skill sets. You need to develop new vocabularies. You want to say something different, or the message that you want to communicate evolves. And so you have to pick up new tools. But like I said, for me, it's always a means to support the art. I don't necessarily think of exploring or learning technique for the sake of technique. I don't really have that kind of discipline or time,
Sure.
To just completely focus on
Immerse
developing
yourself.
technique for the sake of technique. I learn what it is that I need to learn to do the thing that I'm hearing in my head.
Awesome. I love that. And I can personally relate to that. I've continued my education as well and still continue to, study most recently composition, horn composition, that kind of thing. But what I really want to focus, and this is really important, one thing you said is, you didn't really say it, I guess I'll paraphrase here a little bit, but essentially that these instruments are a tool of your creative ability.
Yeah.
Right? So you're learning new tools, as you said, new paint for the canvas, right? Yeah. Through your studies here at the Collective, tell us about some of the teachers you worked with. And I want to hear some, I know you've been a student at the Collective for a while, actually even over at our old place when we were over on 14th,
yes.
Over there. So I want to hear a little bit from you about give some experiences. What are some good experiences you had at the Collective that you think was very unique to that particular?
Well, like you said, I started in person at the very end of 2019, I had a semester of being a part-time in-person student, which was perfect because the pandemic was right around the corner, and I don't think anybody saw that coming, but it gave me, a little bit of face time with the staff so that it was a little comfortable for me to jump into, virtual learning. But I would say, the most unique experience I had was becoming a full-time music student in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Very unique experience.
Yeah, and I mean, it was sort of this amazing gift because I couldn't think of, I mean, first of all, I was trying to learn skills and learn concepts that you can't learn and you can't internalize and integrate in like an off weekend when you're in the middle of a touring cycle. You can't like come home and learn to sight sing music on a long weekend.
Sure.
You really have to develop, dedicate a certain amount of time to that kind of work. And I couldn't think of any kind of way that I would do that, where I would take that amount of time off of work or that I would take that amount of time off of touring. The only scenario for that turned out to be a global pandemic. But
the silver lining.
Yeah, but everybody, was grounded, so there was no FOMO about, missing out on tour dates or anything like
Sure.
that. And it was this incredible way to not only obviously fill my time, but it kept me like really, really engaged with a community on a daily basis, which was incredible because there were classes that I was taking one-on-one, and then there were classes that I was taking that were, group classes. And, it was the perfect time to learn Ableton. Josh is my Ableton teacher.
The best teacher.
Yeah.
It's his favorite by far.
Fantastic Ableton experience. And, perfect time to learn those kinds of skills in particular, I think, because everybody was like stuck at home and you have access to those kinds of tools and so forth. But yeah, I was taking, I think, 9 classes at one point during the summer of 2020.
Easy.
Yeah, there was like,
Can you get them all in while you can?
Yeah,
right?
I had the time, and people were making them seem very appealing and necessary, and so that was an incredibly unique experience for me, I think.
Sure. So I definitely want to talk about the nonprofit work that you've done. I think that's really important. But before we go right there, I want to touch on something. You talked about being able to learn in a short period of time and the difficulties surrounding that, and then how the pandemic kind of opened up the ability to spend more time on self-development in the education world. And specifically, it sounds like one thing that you were kind of new to, and correct me if I'm wrong, at the time, was digital music and music production. Yeah. How important do you feel it is these days to have the knowledge of digital music production? As a singer-songwriter yourself, do you feel like the knowledge you gained from learning Ableton has been beneficial for you?
Yeah, of course. I remember when I was young, so I didn't really start playing music actively until, like I said, I was like 15 or 16, but I jumped in, full on at that point.
All in.
But I remember it being in music class, like when I was in like 3rd or 4th grade, and hearing my music teacher talk about the conductor of an orchestra, and that the conductor didn't necessarily know how to play all of the instruments incredibly well, but knew enough about each one of the instruments.
Can you say that again? Because I love what you just said there. So again, going back, because you keep going back to this, which I love, because I couldn't agree more about this. You're interpreting the conductor position, and I think this is where you're going. I'm sorry to cut you off. I just love that you said this because it's so important to me. That each of those instruments, he knows how to make them work together. It's kind of like building a team.
Yeah, and he knows how to communicate. He knows enough about, a French horn to be able to discuss French horn with the French horn player. And he knows enough about the clarinet to be able to discuss what the clarinet should be doing with the clarinet player, but he himself doesn't necessarily know how to like pick up a French horn and, shred on a French horn.
Shred on a French horn. I love that.
That was actually my first instrument. French horn.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, I got as far as being able to play the Marine Corps anthem, and then I just I don't know, I think the guitar.
It's a very cool looking instrument.
Yeah.
So I can't blame you for starting with that.
Yeah, but
it sounds cool too.
Your hand turns green after
you ever
a while.
put it in the bell? Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so the conductor knows enough about the functions of all the instruments within the larger piece that he can communicate, to those players. But like I said, he himself is not necessarily specialized, in that kind of way. So I think as like as a singer-songwriter or someone, that's creating their own music, there's certain areas like I'm not necessarily gonna mix my own music, but I should know enough about the components
100%.
of mixing to be able to communicate effectively with a mix engineer,
Hmm.
and I should be able to understand enough about, you know, s whatever kinds of plugins or instrumentation I wanna utilize in order to, like I said, the objective is always like, how do I get what's in here out there? And if I don't have any kind of shared vocabulary with other people that I'm collaborating with, I think I'm inevitably gonna be incredibly frustrated with the results and also probably just frustrate everybody else around me,
Sure, sure,
in that process of fishing for the what is it? What's the sound? How do I
sure.
do it? So learning the tools is essential and that the digital music, the chain of events that goes between like sitting down with a guitar and like writing a lyric and actually like making a full record. There's just so many other steps and stages in that process that um, in order to get it where you want it, I think you have to know at least a little bit about each one of those stages.
Sure, and I think you touched on this too. As you go through those stages, you have a specific picture in your mind
Yeah.
of what you want to look at,
Yeah, you
and
have a
you
vision. You got to
right.
communicate your vision to somebody.
Sure, sure, exactly, yeah. And so, as you've learned these things and you've developed, you've picked up new instruments. We discussed the piano. We discussed what you do with the guitar. You just dropped a new project, correctly? Correct me if I'm wrong. Recently, right? Within the past couple months.
Well, I mean, I'm working on a project right now. I put out a lot of music in 2020. This past year has been more of like a quiet year, sort of incubating on new material and new ideas. I think it's pretty natural for things to go in cycles and in
Sure.
seasons like that.
Yes. Yep.
I've started to perform again though, which has been nice, and I've been on the road again, to a degree. And I have some plans for new projects.
Nice.
Things are brewing.
So
Yeah.
let's talk about that real quick. So your performance, right? So
Yeah.
you have this. Uh, it's pretty astonishing. It's an amazing career over doing nonprofit work. You toured in the penitentiary system,
Yeah.
in the state penitentiary, and in addition to doing large festivals like Vans Warped Tour, how different is it coming back from the pandemic now? Do you feel like it's different? Like, has the pandemic affected live performance at all in the sense, or do you feel like people are just excited to be back? It's almost back to how it was before.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I haven't done any like big festivals
Sure,
since the pandemic, so I haven't really. My world has looked a little different. I think everybody's world has looked a
sure,
little different. I think in general, in New York, I think people are excited to be, just out and
sure.
at the movies and at restaurants and seeing shows and seeing live music. And I know that I've had really wonderful experiences, being at museums and seeing music and hearing music and so forth. I think that nothing is ever going to feel the way it did.
Sure, right.
And I don't have any kind of like expectation or idea to like ever get back to sort of like whatever the old normal was
Yeah.
as far as what touring looked like. I'm also like a little older. I have a more serious relationship now that I did, and so touring
Mm.
means something. Like I never had a girlfriend for years because I was never home.
Sure,
And
sure,
so
sure.
I have a kind of a serious girlfriend at this point. So
Nice.
yeah, touring.
Congrats, man.
Yeah, no, it's a gift of the pandemic for sure. But touring looks different as far as that goes. I have a lot of other responsibilities. I have this nonprofit foundation called Art That Serves, and we are doing a lot of work at Rikers Island. So that's local. I'm actually going back in person to Rikers Island to perform and to do a workshop with guys a week from today, which would be the first
Nice.
time that I'll be back in a correctional facility since prior to the pandemic. The last time I worked in a facility was here at Manhattan County around Thanksgiving of 2019.
Oh, wow. So yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, prior to that, I'd toured the whole country and done hundreds of performances in jails and in prisons around the country.
So let's talk about that a little bit because during your time doing that, you also recorded a documentary of
Yeah.
the process, right?
Yeah, well, the documentary we filmed. So I played very regularly in a county jail outside of Richmond called the Chesterfield County Jail, and I met a woman
Richmond,
there.
Virginia, right? This is a return.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and a woman that I performed for had reached out to me when she'd been released from that facility, and very kindly on Facebook had reached out and said, next time you're coming to the area, I'd love to buy you lunch. And we started to correspond a little bit, and I learned more about her story and her experience of being a mother and being incarcerated, and just how difficult the process is as far as what it's like to re-enter society after a period of incarceration, and kind of the ways in which the odds are stacked much higher against an
Yes. Yeah, I
individual,
would say
and
yes. Very true.
yeah, and all the factors that contribute to the really incredibly high rate of recidivism that we have in the country. So like I said, we kind of corresponded a lot, and we really got interested in her story. And simultaneously, while we were planning another tour that went through that area, we got a little film crew, and we did a 3-day shoot in Virginia and sort of got her whole story. And so the film itself was not really about me and the performances that I do, but it was about this woman, Jenny. And the documentary was called Mother's Day Miracle.
Definitely want to check that out. We'll have a link in the description to check that out as well.
Yeah, and it was we met her on Mother's Day, you know, in the Chesterfield County Jail. She came back and spoke to the women that were detained there, and we just learned a lot about her journey. And so we made a film about that, and we were able to raise a really, really nice amount of money for a community space and a food pantry that was really essential in her reentry process.
So cool, man.
And it was a really magical experience. And one thing I'll say also, and this I think is really important for everybody that wants to, you know, have a career in the arts or anything, or really any kind of career. Sometimes you just gotta like go in the direction you're being pulled and not get in the way of it. But like if you had told me, you know, 10 years ago that I would be involved in you know, this kind of nonprofit work and making a documentary film about a woman's reentry experience after being incarcerated in Virginia, like I think it was crazy. I couldn't imagine any conceivable way that would happen based on what, you know, my life was about or what was important to me then.
Sure.
But it was one of the most magic and important things I feel like I've ever been involved in, and such an honor and such a privilege to sort of get that level of insight.
Well, I can hear the passion in your voice as you talk about it too. So not only are you doing it and it's making changes in people's lives, like the woman who reached out to you, but you are enjoying it as well.
Yeah, no, it changes my life. And one thing I'll say is, like, as far as making music goes and making art goes, for me, making music just to like become a rock star, you know, it wasn't a sustainable enough source of motivation for me.
Yeah, sure.
It drove me insane. It was just you know, asking for frustration and disappointment.
You wanted to do more. You felt a need to do more.
And what I also found was that when my music kind of got coupled with this other sense of purposefulness and like how I could be useful with my music, my artistic life also expanded tremendously. Like I really was able to get out of my own way.
Yeah.
My writing.
Yeah. It opened up.
Yeah. I mean, my songwriting, like, it just like exploded.
Sure.
You know, my whole my audience, you know, my social media audience and just in general, my fan base completely expanded and changed. I mean, I developed this really, really grassroots touring network over the course of those years.
Mm-hmm.
And I have like little adopted families like all over the country as a result of it. Yeah. And you know, living with, I mean, God, some of the people that put me up over the course of those initial first 3 years doing the prison work is amazing. But the point I'm making was that it was, not only was it one of the most amazing things for me personally and for my soul, but it was probably the best thing I've ever done for my career as well. Like, it really just, the whole thing took on its own energy and developed its own momentum.
It's so cool. It's awesome to hear that, man. And it's awesome just to hear your passion behind doing something like that.
Indeed,
and I think as a musician, you're always striving to do more and make an impact through your art.
Yeah, you want to move people, right?
Yeah, totally. And develop a fan base that believes in what you're doing and wants to be part of that too. So it's lifting the system up and being able to do good work for people who are essentially stuck in a cycle, right? I mean, it's sad, really. It's not very, the numbers, the system's built against people, it seems, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the reality of the justice system, that's a whole other conversation to have. And I'll just say, you know, along those lines, that there's a lot to be grateful for, and my experience has been humbling, and it's work that I continue to do. Like I said, we're really getting involved in doing a lot of work at Rikers Island now.
Let's talk about that because I really
yeah.
want to get that in. Art that serves, right? That's what you're calling.
Correct. Yeah.
I love the name. That's really cool. So tell us a little bit about Art That Serves and this new venture that you have, and what you're going to be doing with
Sure.
the people who are serving at Rikers Island.
Yeah. So initially, my nonprofit work got started as a means to sort of like accept a donation while I was on tour traveling around to visit prisons. And primarily it was a platform for bringing my own performances into facilities. But during the pandemic, we wanted to really expand and figure out ways to bring other artists and other types of art into correctional facilities. And, it started off with a friend who's a professor at Rutgers who brought a class on Greek tragedy and Greek
That's
monologues.
cool.
Yeah. Into correctional facilities. A friend of mine, Elizabeth Davis, who is the amazing fiddle player in the Broadway show Once. Won a bunch of Tonys.
Yeah, that's cool.
She wrote a play and brought it in, and was able to perform it at Rikers. And
so it's not just music; it's also theatrics. And
yeah,
stuff
I mean, we're really trying to make it interdisciplinary. I'm actually writing a poetry course right now.
Cool.
But one of the things that's really interesting is that as a result of the pandemic and there being no in-person services allowed, just the way like I couldn't go to school at the collective anymore, the only way to bring this kind of arts programming or any kind of volunteer services into a correctional facility became, digitally.
Sure.
Through tablet systems
Sure.
that they actually have, that different companies have set up, and that's a discussion as well. But it became something like very similar to what I did as a collective student, where you were getting these virtual courses and you could have a certain amount of feedback from a live instructor, and then you could provide your own feedback and have it reviewed by a teacher and stuff like that. And so right now we're in the process of creating virtual curriculums, sort of similar to what Sound Collective does. I'm like I said, I'm creating a poetry course that's a combination of text, the actual poetry, and there's a multimedia audio-visual component to it.
That's very cool.
And yeah, so that's all stuff, that we learned during the pandemic, and I'm using Logic to record, people reciting the work and stuff like that, and composing ambient and instrumental music to put behind the recorded poems and stuff like that.
Be creative.
So, yeah,
some expression.
And ways to give people an experience.
Sure.
And
hopefully empower them, give them something to look forward to. That's great, man. So why don't we do this? I know you brought your guitar.
I did indeed.
A man and his guitar.
Indeed.
And I would love to hear some of the new stuff that you're working on.
Sure.
But before we do that, real quick, is there anything, I know you have a new project you're putting together.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that real quick, and then we'll see a performance.
Well, I'm putting together, and this is probably the first I've ever really said about it outside of my own.
Is this exclusive?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I obviously I have this, this nonprofit component to what I'm doing, but I'm still a songwriter and an artist, and I think a storyteller at heart. So I'm putting together what is sort of like a one-man show, although I think it's going to be maybe a three person. I'd like to actually bring some other musicians into it.
Sure.
But a full theater piece that's a mixture of my own music and sort of spoken word monologue, where I'm kind of telling a larger story about my experience of having been on the road for 3 or 4 years, traveling the country in prisons. It's a pretty interesting way to experience America, I'll tell you
sure.
that.
Yeah.
So I'm putting together my own theater piece about it, and it's called Reckless Sun.
Love it. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And you're gonna just relive through the music and the performance of the spoken word pieces?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's something that I've been building organically without realizing it per se over the course of the past few years, because it's what I do naturally, where I've written a lot of material about what I've experienced and what I've learned and what I've seen, touring in correctional facilities. And then when I come in and I play, at a club or whatever, I tell the stories about it.
Sure.
So now really what I'm doing is I'm just kind of like codifying it and really putting it together and turning it into I'm going to turn it into a real proper show and actually rather than saying, Matt Butler Live, I'm just going to have it up on that marquee. It's just going to say Reckless Sun.
I love it.
Yeah, and it's going to be like a mixture of, my tunes, and then...
And you're creating an experience for people as well.
Oh, it'll be an experience. It's gonna be a real journey. The idea is to really feel like you've been on a journey from the beginning to the end.
I love it. I love it, man. That's so cool. I can't wait to see it. Well, let's go ahead and we're gonna play some tunes. I'm telling you guys right now, definitely want to check out Matt's music. It's amazing. You already talked about him being a storyteller. I would co-sign that 100%. The stories and the music he sings, it definitely tells a story, and it'll keep you engaged. And it's great. The songwriting is just phenomenal. I've heard a lot of the tunes, and I've actually worked on some tunes with you.
Indeed.
And just your ability when you're in the studio, you really know what you're doing, and you have a very, very good musical sense of direction as far as where you want to express yourself, and it's very easy to follow, even as somebody that was collaborating with you. So let's go ahead and get into that. For those of you interested, we'll have links to Matt's music down below. So we're going to get Matt set up here and give you a little performance of some of his tunes. Do you have any tunes that you particularly you're going to sing? You want to give us the titles?
Yeah, I'm going to play a song that is going to be in the show.
Oh,
but it's actually
cool.
a song that I wrote for my little brother a bunch of years ago. So I'm going to play you guys a song called "The Man That You've Become."
Love it. All right, here we go.
On deck aboard a pilot boat, we waited for the light. Huddled close, we warmed our hands, breathing fog into the night. Through ancient ways of navigation, following a star. Oh, brother, I can't tell you where you're going, but I know just where you are. Every time I close my eyes or sink into a sleep, I stare across the sky. I hear the sound of your heartbeat. I see the man that you've become, following a dream. Skate across the ocean like a figure on the ice. The waves will come crashing down like tumbling dice. But place no faith in destinations, be they near or far. Oh, brother, I can't tell you where you're going, but I know just who you are. I watched you as you've grown up tall, humble in your rising and gracious in the fall. You'll see the world, you'll see it all, as the man that you've become, in service of a cause. Just listen for your call. Yeah, yeah. When the night begins to fall off the day, soon you'll ask what makes this world this way. Inside the silence, if you start to pray, you'll hear a voice will say that patiently the water's waiting there for you and me. 1,000 miles of ocean only leads into the sea, but your hand will trace the state of grace, a map from up above. 'Cause brother, I can tell you where you're going, you're bringing light and bringing love. So I'll follow as you light my way, with the wisdom of a child joyously at play. I'll find you as you find your own way. It's the man that you'll become. Yeah, the man man you are today.